President Trump's past fortnight seems less like an episode of The West Wing than an Italian opera as performed by the cast of Animal House. He scandalized the Boy Scouts, hired a foul-mouthed communication chief who self-destructed almost on arrival, lashed out at China, dismayed the transgender community and fueled speculation about his campaign's true dealings with Russia. Trump has been in the Oval Office for just over 6 months, but he has lost none of his ability to shock his party, his country and the world. Like the anchor of a reality TV show who knows he has to keep up the ratings, there have been plot twists on a daily basis that ensure the billionaire remains at the center of global attention. Here are 9 things the president has done in the last fortnight that have left observers shocked, startled and bewildered. 1. Hired a new communications chief, then sacked him 10 days later. Anthony Scaramucci speaks to members of the media at the White House. Multimillionaire New Yorker Anthony "The Mooch" Scaramucci ignited a firestorm of profanity, accusations, and political defenestration before being sent packing himself. Sean Spicer, Trump's press secretary, resigned rather than serve under the former financier. This made headlines, but the bigger storm was about to break. There was much speculation about Mr. Scaramucci's relationship with White House Chief of Staff Reince Priebus. Mr. Priebus is said to have previously stopped him getting a job with the administration, and Mr. Scaramucci admitted that "we rough each other up once in a while, which is totally normal for brothers." But then he made a nighttime phone call to a journalist in which denounced Mr. Priebus as a paranoid schizophrenic, threatened to fire the entire White House communications staff, and used an obscene metaphor to describe Chief Strategist Steve Bannon's attitude to his job. Mr. Scaramucci was a walking publicity magnet. The Times reported that he chose to accompany President Trump to an event in West Virginia rather than attend the birth of his child. It noted that within the space of a month Mr. Scaramucci has become a new father, a prospective divorcee and the White House communications chief, but more was to come. Chief of Staff Mr. Priebus was ousted from his position and replaced by retired 4-star General John F. Kelly. Mr. Kelly did not waste time in laying down his own authority by sacking Mr. Scaramucci. The former Marine will have a clear vision for how he can bring order to a faction-riven White House, but whether he can impose discipline on the tweeter-in-chief is another matter. In a speech to law enforcement officials on July 28, he talked about thugs being thrown into the back of a paddy wagon and said, "Please don't be too nice." The White House press secretary said she thought he was making a joke at the time. 3. Launched a political tirade during a speech to Boy Scouts. Trump with around 40,000 scouts. Trump stepped out in front of a crowd of around 40,000 scouts on July 24 and delivered a nakedly political speech, during which he denounced this horrible thing known as Obamacare, joked about firing a cabinet member and compared Washington to a sewer. The Chief Scout executive late offered his sincere apologies to those in our scouting family who were offended by the political rhetoric that was inserted into the jamboree. They reportedly later said they are unaware who told Trump his controversial speech to thousands of members was the greatest speech that was ever made to them. 4. Announced a ban on transgender people in the military. Protesters gathered in Times Square after Trump declared a ban on transgender troops in yet another example of governing by Twitter. He reportedly blindsided the Joint Chiefs of Staff by announcing on July 26 that transgender people would no longer be able to serve in the U.S. forces. However, Chairman General Joseph Dunford announced there will be no modifications to the current policy until the Defense Secretary receives orders from the President and he then issues guidelines for implementation. He insisted that, in the meantime, we will continue to treat all of our personnel with respect. According to the New York Times, Trump was attempting to resolve a row over whether taxpayer money should pay for gender transition and hormone therapy for transgender service members, which threatened a $790 billion spending package. Where did it all go wrong? President Donald Trump talks with Attorney General Jeff Sessions. Back in 2015, Jeff Sessions was the friend Trump needed. He was the first senator to endorse the reality TV star, and after the election Trump repaid his loyalty by announcing him as his pick for Attorney General. But the president is infuriated that Mr. Sessions recused himself from the investigation into Russian meddling in the election. If he was going to recuse himself, he should have told me prior to taking office and I would have quite simply picked something else, he said. A special counsel is now investigating any links between the Trump campaign and the Russian government, and Trump last week publicly belittled Mr. Sessions, calling him beleaguered and very weak. Welsh Tory leader compares Nicola Sturgeon to Donald Trump. Donald Trump Jr.'s role in the campaign is under scrutiny. The Trump family are under intensifying pressure as investigators and the press continue to probe links with Russia. The biggest revelation of the summer came when it was reported that Donald Trump Jr. attended a meeting with a Russian figure who had information that would incriminate Hillary and was part of Russia's and its government's support for Mr. Trump. The then candidate's son replied, saying that if it's what you say, I love it. The Washington Post this week reported that Trump personally dictated a statement in which Trump Jr. said that he and the Russian lawyer had primarily discussed a program about the adoption of Russian children. The Post stated that Trump's advisors worry that the president's direct involvement leaves him needlessly vulnerable to allegations of a cover-up. Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, a key target of U.S. intelligence, Trump often finds time to attack North America's most celebrated newspaper, but on July 22 he went so far as to accuse it of foiling an attempt to kill so-called Islamic State leader Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. It is thought this tweet was in response to a Fox News report broadcast about 25 minutes earlier in which a general said that a lead about where al-Baghdadi might be hiding out was leaked in a prominent national newspaper and then went dead. The Times reported that the information had been made public in a Pentagon news release more than 3 weeks before the Times article. Lisa Murkowski was one of 9 Republican senators to vote against the healthcare bill in the Senate. Trump's failure to scrap Obamacare is a source of boiling frustration for the president. The Senate's refusal to repeal the bill is the latest blow to his authority in his own party. He singled out Alaskan Republican Senator Lisa Murkowski after she opposed the dismantling of the healthcare provisions. On Twitter on July 26, he accused her of letting down her party and her country, and the Alaska Dispatch News then reported that by the afternoon each of Alaska's 2 Republican senators had received a phone call from Interior Secretary Ryan Zinke letting them know the vote had put Alaska's future with the administration in jeopardy. Mr. Zinke says it is laughable to think he threatened the lawmakers, but Trump can expect even greater skepticism and resistance from fellow Republicans if they feel bullied. A cooling relationship. U.S. President Donald Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping. Stopping World War III breaking out in Southeast Asia is a key challenge for the Trump presidency. North Korea is trying to build a nuclear missile that is capable of reaching the United States, and China's efforts to dominate the South China Sea are driving up tensions with its neighbors. Trump had tried to charm Chinese President Xi Jinping, even hosting him at his Mar-a-Lago winter White House in Florida. But on July 30, Trump tired of trying to coax China into reining in the nuclear ambitions of North Korea, claiming on Twitter that they do nothing for us with North Korea, just talk. In a clear rattle of a saber, he added, "We will no longer allow this to continue. Everything we know about North Korea's intercontinental nuclear missiles